space. Sorry, I'm really interested in you said about the approach of working through engaging with communities and listening to Muslim communities and maybe having that in some way influence the policy of the U.S. And I'm curious how that process of engagement, how that has filtered up, let's say through what you've met and people that you've spoken to. How has that come back into what's happened in the...
I'm really happy you asked that question. What has been really remarkable to me is that, if you are a typical bureaucrat and you think about how we're going to invest our money and our time, it's yes, you're looking around through our embassies. It's the lens, we're all on the ground in every country, obviously. And we normally have programs that are really, I'm not dissing some of the really great programs that we have. This is to complement some terrific programs. But if we only go to the same players all the time and say, okay, we've worked with them over the course of the last 10 years, we're going to give more money to them, we're going to just do the same old, you're never thinking creatively. What we're doing is we're pushing our embassies to go deep and go wide, to say, look, I want you to get to know the people that you may not know yet. So you're reaching out and you're bringing new faces to the table because then you're exploring the ideas that they have on how to do things differently and you're willing to take that risk. This Secretary of State has not said, you must perform this way and you must give me this result. What she's asked us to do, our embassies around the world, is to be creative, to expand our notion of how to do things, to listen to that smaller voice that happens to be in a community that we know has the credibility, and I didn't use that word before, but I want to use it. Who has credibility on a local level? It is local partners on the ground. What we need to do is to take the time to get to know them and actually listen to their approach. And by the way, what I was saying about Barcelona and Madrid, unbelievably important. You cannot say the approach to Spain is all going to be like this and this is how we're going to do it. The nuance on the texture, how insulting is it to suggest that somebody who is doing a program in Boston, Massachusetts is going to take the same approach as in New Orleans? It's a completely different landscape. It really makes a difference to how you think about things. We want to know community activism. So when you ask the question, you're getting to know different partners and you're listening to what they have to say that is moving up the chain because the ambassadors and others are hearing about the programs, I'm hearing about the programs and we're moving them up. The other piece that I didn't talk about either is the connectivity of global networks. What we're doing is saying this. When I meet the guy, and I did, in Kano, Nigeria, who has an amazing idea, and guess what? It actually is the same idea as somebody I met in Kuala Lumpur. Why can't I connect them? And then what do we do? We walk away. I don't want credit. I don't want, brought to you by the US government. I want two smart people to come together and figure out how they work together. You're becoming an idea incubator. It's what we all did in college. It's what you do in grad school. It's putting smart people in a room, shutting the door and saying they will figure it out. They're going to know how to work on this project. Policy changes that way. The way we think changes that way. The way our embassies are socialized is changed that way. In my understanding, and forgive me if I just don't think that there's another country on the planet that's actually doing things this way, it takes a hell of a lot of time to get to know all these different kinds of people. But I actually believe, especially with technology, you can mobilize and move at a faster pace and you can get these ideas out. So I'm excited about it. I think it's the way to go. Yes, sir.
Sorry, we only have the one hand mic, as it turned out right now. Do you mind just repeating the question?
Oh, of course.
My name's Joel Ranald. I'm a UK resident, and I work for One Voice. But my question, as a religious person, and you spoke about identity, and my only area of knowledge of the UK and a bit of Western Europe is that government policy is very confused about whether it wants assimilation or integration. As someone who thinks that assimilation is the last thing that I would ever want, and I educate my movements against, in my own background, the confusion when it specifically comes to the Jewish Islamic community within Western Europe is confused, messed up, and creates a narrative that people don't know how to interact. So a challenge that I throw back to you as a policymaker who interacts on an interlocutor government level is there needs to be clarity, in my view, to integration rather than assimilation, and the understanding that people's identities are not under threat. We're not asking people to assimilate, we're asking people to integrate. It's a very important, nuanced thing that needs to be said.
How many people here are from Europe? Okay, so I'm asking that because I don't want to get into too much of a discussion about what is happening, particularly on this issue of identity and integration, because as you know, it's been an ongoing conversation for almost a decade. in earnest. I remember I was at the White House and The Economist came to my office, and on the front page of The Economist was the Eiffel Tower. On the top of the Eiffel Tower was a crescent, and it said Eurabia, you know, and it was like a fear of identity and what was going to happen. I think every country in Europe is going through an identity challenge. I think they're all asking the kinds of questions that you're asking. I think the models are going to shift and change depending on the culture around, but it's this issue of respecting the differences and making it okay. And I think what's very interesting for me, especially in my last job, the first question I always asked everybody was, what does it mean to be German, Swiss, Austrian, Italian? And I would ask that of immigrants who have come into the country, and I'd ask that of ethnic Europeans. And you'd get this blank, horrified stare, like, how do I answer that? I remember talking to a guy in Switzerland who was a Swiss, ethnically Swiss for generations. And I said, Remy, tell me, what does it mean to be Swiss? And I asked him this on the first day of a 3-day visit, and he didn't know how to answer me. He goes, let me think. Second day I saw him, he's like, I'm still thinking. On the third day, he said, Farah, I figured it out. I know how to answer that question. What does it mean? So we like football. And I was like, okay, that after 3 days, that's not so great. But the thing is, it is an ongoing struggle, and it is not just obviously for immigrants, it's what is happening around when you look at a country in a particular way. The kid that I meet in Oslo, who's a third generation Pakistani immigrant, though he has never been to Pakistan, though he doesn't speak Urdu, says to me, how am I supposed to be Norwegian? Look at my face, look at my hair, look at my eyes. This is not what a Norwegian is supposed to look like. So that question is front and center, and I agree with you. It is very complex. Governments are dealing with this question. They have not come to a synthesis. You've heard what Sarkozy is doing right now in France with the issue of identity. It is ongoing. But I think governments can have that conversation on one level, but community activists can have it in a more robust way so that you're mobilizing the idea of what it means to actually respect differences.